It's kind of like an overwhelming want for certain cuts. And, it really just makes you wonder, like, where the rest of the animal is going. That's why I feel really good about where I'm working now, because I get to see where the rest of the animal goes.
Hello! Welcome to The Corner Table, a Capital Times podcast about food and drink in Madison. I met Allie Christian a few weeks ago when I was working on a Cap Times cover story about sustainable meat, the grass-fed beef and pasture-raised chickens from shops like Conscious Carnivore and where Allie works, Underground Butcher on Williamson Street. I got to watch Allie and her colleagues break down a whole Angus steer. It was fascinating, and I recommend it to any meat eater. I am your host, Cap Times food writer Lindsay Christians. I asked Allie to come by the studio to talk about how she got into butchery, what she's learned, and why using the whole animal is important to her. Stay tuned. Welcome, Allie.
Hey.
So, first of all, can you just tell everybody who you are and what you do?
Yeah, I'm Allie Christian. I am currently a butcher at Underground Butcher. I've been there for about 4 months.
Why did you decide you wanted to go into butchery?
Well, the last 2 years I was sous chef at Gray's. Working in kitchens can get a little stressful at times and long hours. So I think at one point I was just kind of ready for a change. And not only that, but, learning is something that's really important to me. And I started, looking at my skill set and looking at my strengths and looking at my weaknesses. And butchery was definitely one of the things that was a weakness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gray's is part of that, Latois, Deja Food Group.
Yep.
I know they work a lot with large cuts of animal, right? Did you do any butchering when you were there at Gray's?
Mostly fabrication, and what that is like, say for example, you get, a whole sirloin, like a whole top sirloin in. So fabricating it would be like taking out the silver skin, doing any seaming, and then portioning it into steaks.
When you talk about seaming, just describe a little bit what that is.
So the seaming is pretty much like the tissue in between the muscle. It's almost like a guide in itself. And that kind of stuff is not the stuff you want to eat. For example, well, I'll go back to the top sirloin. There's a top sirloin and then the sirloin cap, otherwise known as a culotte or a picanha. There's a very natural seam between those two. And basically what you have to do is just kind of split that open and use your knife just to kind of literally split the two in half.
One of the things that surprised me when I went to the shop the other day and was watching you guys kind of take apart a steer was you have these very, very long, sharp knives. And I feel like when you think of a butcher knife, you think of a chef's knife. It looks like a big knife, when you see butcher knife.
Yeah.
But this was a long, almost like a fillet knife, like a really thin kind of boning knife. And you guys were mostly using those. Can you talk a little bit about how you work to sort of separate out some of the component parts so that we, to get us to steaks that we would recognize?
Sure. Yeah, so the reason we use smaller knives, if you look at the knife compared to the carcass, it's a little ridiculous at first. But the reason for that being is, when it might not look like it, but when we're in there, it requires a little bit of, being precise. There's certain parts where you're only using the very tip of your knife. A lot of times boning knives are good for boning things, separating the meat from bone. But yeah, it was something that took me, I would get really frustrated when I first started there because I'm the type of person that gets mad when I'm not good at things right away. But everyone told me it takes about 2 months. And right around that 2-month mark, I started to become very familiar with the anatomy of a steer. Yeah.
One of the butchers I spoke with said that it takes about 6 months total for someone to really understand whether butchery is for them.
Yeah, I mean, I've kind of heard the same thing. There's a lot of cooks that tend to, go work at butcher shops, and someone told me that either you really like it and you stay with it, or you go back to cooking. I do feel like I was talking with a friend the other day, and she said that butchering is kind of a dying art. So maybe it is a little bit more of a strange choice to make.
It's such a physical job.
Yeah.
Have you found that you've gotten stronger since you've been doing it these past 4 months?
Yes. Yeah, I feel like that. I think a lot of people look at me and they're like, there's no way she's a butcher. But yeah, I don't know. Sometimes I think my body surprises me sometimes.
Do you get sore at the end of the day?
Oh, when I first started, yes. Like every Thursday when we would do steer breakdown, I would just get home and have to lay on the couch. My body's definitely getting used to it now, but I think that also has to do with me working more effectively because I know it a little bit better now.
So outside of your job itself, do you find that people are squeamish around meat? I was surprised how many people were nervous about putting the photo of the animal on the cover of the Cap Times and then also using the word meat.
Yeah.
Because people are sensitive. And yet we're eating more meat this year than we have in recent history. So I wonder, do you encounter a squeamishness among folks that you know about the work that you do?
Yeah. There's a couple of people that will come into the shop and, they're always interested by what's on the table. But there are a couple of people that are just look quick and then look away, which is fine. For me, that's something I don't really get that squeamish about things. So, my parents, they were gardeners, and my dad worked for the Department of Agriculture and was a hunter and a trapper, so I was exposed to that kind of stuff fairly early on.
Did you hunt as a kid?
I have. When I was fairly young, I used to help my dad out in what's called a fur shed. He would have his trap line and go out every day to check his traps. Anything that he caught was brought back to this kind of workshop area where, it was skinned and the fat was removed from the pelt, and I kind of helped my dad out on a lot of that stuff. So
one of the more fun questions that I got to ask when I was there, watching you guys kind of break a steer down, was about your favorite cuts, things that you've discovered. Mm-hmm. And I wonder, do you have a lot of conversations with folks who come in maybe looking for a particular cut that you don't have a lot of because there's only one or two on the animal or something? Right. But do you have conversations with folks about, okay, I know you're looking for this, but here's this other cut that you maybe don't know about? Sure. Yeah. What I find most common is a lot of customers will come in and they don't know what they want. When it starts there, I always ask them, well, what are you cooking? And then we kind of work from there. I'll use my background in cooking, some of that knowledge, knowing what cuts work best for that. I think, a lot of people underestimate how good roasts are, myself being included in that. I feel like it's really easy to get wrapped up in the luxury of a steak, which I'm not hating on steaks. Steaks are great. But it wasn't until I started working at the shop that I was buying a couple different things to try, eye of rounds or tri-tips, and, learning the art and cooking those properly. And I don't know, they just look really beautiful, and they come out and you rest them and you slice them. And not only that, but you can feed a whole bunch of people, so it's always a bonus. Tell me a little bit about a typical week for you. When do the animals come in? Do you sort of have an ebb and flow of okay, Tuesday we work on a bunch of stuff to give to Underground Meats? Tell me a little bit about your week. Okay, yeah. So every Thursday we get a steer in for breakdown, whole steer. Every other Friday is 2 hogs, which we've actually started getting 1 hog on our off Friday because we're going through so much pork. And then getting a lamb in is just kind of playing it by ear.
But besides animal breakdowns, obviously, like, the biggest thing is making the case look nice. Having things out on display that people might be interested in, which all depends on seasons, too. Like, winter, we do a lot of roast, a lot of braising meats, whereas summer, like, we just stack the case with steaks and sausages. But, Monday and Tuesday, we're really just cranking out brats lately. And then, obviously, organization. It's really nice to have the beginning of the week to do a lot of cleaning, making sure, the product is being rotated, any types of, like, pâtés or terrines. We'll do those, too, which is kind of a nice break for some of us, like, being able to cook something a little bit.
One of the things that I wanted to focus on when I wrote this story recently was how places are using the whole animal. Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about how Underground uses all the parts of, for example, beef?
Yeah. That's one thing that I think we do pretty well. So obviously, you kind of saw the breakdown. One of the first things we do on the hindquarter is remove the beef tallow, which is the fat that's around the kidneys. We will grind that and render it down, and we actually will sell it for our retail case. It can be used like a lot of other types of oil. Like, you hear about like duck fat fries or like frying things in animal fat. Can be used very much the same. And same goes for hogs, too. Like, we use fatback or the leaf lard. We make a lot of stock in-house. As far as bones go, we get a lot of people with dogs that come in and buy them. We get a lot of people that come in and want to make their own bone broth. And then any sort of, like, trimmings that come off some of these cuts, we, clean it up and we'll use it for ground beef. We really do use, like, every part of the animal that we can. Livers, all the offal. I'll try to, like, put that into pâtés. At the shop, we'll sell beef tongue or beef cheeks. We have all that for sale.
When I came in a couple of weeks ago now, I think, when I first came in, one of your butchers was working with a pig tongue, I think, and he was going to, like, pickle it?
Yeah, pickled pig tongue, yeah.
Do you just, like, sell it as pickled pig tongue then, or do you put it in something else?
I think he was actually going to put it in some sort of a pâté. Our last butcher dinner, which is something we do, I'm not sure how often it is, but one Sunday, basically all the butchers will go over to Four Quarter and we'll, like, design our own menu and sell it for the night. It's really fun. I've been lucky enough to be a part of one of those so far, and we're going to be doing another one around Father's Day.
That sounds so good.
It's fun. I really enjoy doing that. It allows me to be creative. But the last butcher dinner we did, we had a kind of like a charcuterie item. It was pickled pig tongue.
Have you seen interest when people come in? Do they want to, like, watch you work? Like, are there people who are wanting to learn more about butchery? I know that Underground has offered classes before because I've taken 2 of them.
Yeah. Underground Meats offers hog classes and sausage making classes. There are some people, that will, like, hang out and watch. I've had a couple people that, like, will actually come behind the case, which I don't mind, but I think other people in the in the shop probably think that's a no-no. I don't mind it because seeing somebody get excited about it makes me excited. And it's really kind of a cool interaction.
I found there was a poultry class. We were taking apart ducks, and we had it at Madison Sourdough. Underground had it years ago, and that was really fun because I learned how much you have to use your hands to take things apart. Like, you really got to get in there with your hands, and I became so much more handsy with my food, which I thought was great. But the pig class was a different experience in part because I thought, I am never going to have a side of pig. But at the same time, knowing how the parts of the pig sort of came apart into the things that we think of as, like, chops and ribs and steaks and roasts, and it was really educational for me to sort of say, okay, I know that if I order, for example, a quarter pig or a half pig from a farmer, that I can ask for this cut instead of that cut.
Right.
But I can't have both.
Yeah.
Because they come from the same place.
Yes.
And I always found that very fascinating because I feel like that's something that I heard sort of as I was reporting the story, that there is kind of a lack of understanding about where some of these things come from.
Yeah. It's kind of like an overwhelming want for certain cuts. And, it really just makes you wonder, like, where the rest of the animal is going. That's why I feel really good about where I'm working now. Because I get to see where the rest of the animal goes, And if people don't come in and buy specific cuts, I can use it in other ways around the shop. Or, because underground is like its own like umbrella thing. There's forequarter, catering, and obviously the retail shop where we can kind of move these things around and make sure that they get used.
Whether it's in sausage or a dish at forequarter or...
Yeah, exactly. Yep, and that's one nice thing. It's all about communication. If I tell Johnny or someone, like, hey, we have a surplus of this, is there a way you can use it? Otherwise, I can try and make it into a sandwich special, which is also really fun, too.
Are there things that you've discovered from working there that you didn't really know about before, things that have surprised you?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I feel like my world as far as meat goes, like I knew about certain cuts, like New York strip, ribeye, sirloin, shanks, things like that. I really like the way that we break down a steer at Underground because there's so many cuts that I didn't know anything about. And when I first came into the shop, I believe it was an underblade, which is a steak that sits underneath the shoulder blade. And I asked them what it was, and like what it was like. And I bought that steak, and then I asked if they were hiring. But it's really strange, because I came in and like I didn't really have any knowledge about these cuts. And now I'm behind the counter, and so many people, just like I was, came in and are asking me the same questions.
I really loved how the butchers would show me where a cut was by pointing to an area of their body. That was like my favorite thing.
Yeah. I mean, that happened slowly because I didn't think of it like on my body at first, but it just kind of like slowly happens. I think one thing I would get tripped up on a lot was, like the cow comes in and it's kind of stuck in a position where it's hanging. And so you kind of have to think about how it stands naturally. And trying to get my mind around that was definitely difficult. But yeah, I do that just to show them where the cut is on my body, which is probably weird.
It works.
Yeah.
It's sort of like holding up your hand to say, I'm from this city.
Yeah. Like the whole Wisconsin thing.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, thank you so much for letting me watch you work and for answering all my questions when I came in those several times. It was really helpful. And thank you so much for coming in today.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here.
This has been The Corner Table, a podcast about food and drink in Madison produced by the Capital Times. Our music was composed by Patrick Christians. Find my May 16th cover story, Farm Raised, at captimes.com, where you can also see a photo gallery of Allie and her fellow butchers at work. Follow us on Facebook at Corner Table Podcast, and subscribe to The Corner Table anywhere you get your podcasts. Stay tuned next week for my interview with Hari Shin, the Korean-American cook behind Hari's Kitchen. I'm your host, Cap Times food writer Lindsay Christians. My wish for you this week is a new kind of steak on the grill, which is just what I've been craving lately. Happy summer, Madison! Cheers!